Okay. Talking about the breath, some things, so some strategies that I did is remember that we talk about linking these directions. This group here for warrior training, we don't have to look at these directions as independently. So I mix my breath with my imagination. How do I do that? I have a bubble of perception. How do I establish the bubble of perception? I do it with visual techniques. I do inclusive vision, and the inclusive vision helps me to pay attention to a myriad of detail. So I have a technique where I focus on detail. And sometimes that detail is like something you can, no, I think you could always take a picture of it. It's just the other person that's looking at it would also have to kind of be in that frame of mind to appreciate it. Otherwise, they'd be like, why'd you take a picture of a receipt laying on the ground? But have you been to like art fairs where they take pictures of like just empty buildings and like they're overgrown? And it's like, what is it about? Some people would walk by this and just be like, what is it about this? And then some people would walk about by it and they would feel the silence. They would feel the stillness. They would feel the life at the same time with all of that growth. They may even be able to feel a contrast to when maybe at a different time that exact area was filled with humans and activity and bustling, right? So that's the connection, that you would make to that type of art. But that art comes from that type of mind, the mind that is looking at a sprinkler, a mind that is looking at um, just all of the little detail as you're going throughout your day. And it's not necessarily, it can be, but I think it's actually, if you really want to step up your practice in specificity, I recommend trying to practice on things that you don't necessarily go to by default. Roses, we go to by default. Beautiful skies, we go to by default. And that's okay. I'm not declaring war on that. Like I have no issue with that. But I'm saying that if for any reason you wanted to increase the specificity of your practice, for any reason that you think it's necessary, then paying attention to detail that would ordinarily be mundane, I'm putting that in air quotes, put your mind there the most. And then Jerry, I know you got that written down somewhere. Wherever your mind is normally the least, put it there the most. I'm sure that the term context disarrangement just went through Donna's mind, and boom, everything comes together. Oh my gosh, Shayna wrote it down in the chat. And that's what I'm getting to, Ida. So what I would do so sometimes my breath wasn't even just plugged up. Actually, my breath is almost never plugged up. I used to have allergies. I can breathe through my nose almost all year round. And I'm not saying that like I'm healthy or that's a statistical fact. I really don't get a lot of phlegm or anything. Like I don't get head colds or what we would call wind invasions in Chinese medicine very often. It just is, you know, and that's okay. I probably will at some point now that I've mentioned it, so it's all good. But there's times when I would experience the lung qi deficiency and breathing would actually almost be a little bit painful, right? So my diaphragm would feel constricted and the breath would require muscles that I wouldn't normally use. And then those muscles would be antagonists to other muscles. And then all of a sudden, my upper traps hurt, like my lower back and middle back hurts. One shoulder's like this, and I'm crunching like this, and I'm like, whoa, like how did this all? It's a pattern. It's the web that has no, it's not just one thing, it's all of these different things occurring at once. And so I realized, and this is an old principle that we've talked about before, like if you have pain in an area, focusing on that pain is probably going to be uncomfortable. And putting yourself in something uncomfortable is something that the brain doesn't like. It doesn't really want you to do that. Well, even if it's good for you. I mean, that's why we typically there's some people actually they start to feel different things from it and then they get addicted to maybe even that, like the runner's high, that type of thing, the endorphins and things that are released in exercise. Like sometimes people actually get addicted to that feeling. And that should be expected. It's the chemical soup, and so we start to really crave certain chemicals. But I don't know why I was mentioning that, but so ultimately what I would do is it, and we mentioned this before, but I would typically, if I feel pain in an area or in my chest or with a breathing technique, I increase the degree of imagination. because imagination never hurts. Like it's not a thing that hurts. It doesn't provide pain. Well, it could emotional pain if you're imagining things that are unpleasant, but otherwise, imagination is something that I would put more degree of attention with my breath. So in my moment, I have my bubble of perception and I imagine filling it with my breath. And so now I'm going to do the imagination technique of it even more. And depending on the pain, the imagination technique is just a little bit more outside of my body because the pain exists in my body. So I don't want to disregard and try to push away and try to pretend that this doesn't exist because that's actually also still just highlighting it. That's all you're doing in that moment too, is just highlighting it. And then that's still just going to do the same thing, which will likely intensify it. Does that make sense? Is that true to experience for most in terms of paying attention to pain? Like really, I think we do it intuitively too. Like we redirect our mind when there's pain. That's what the whole jumping up and down when you stub your toe is. It's a form of context disarrangement for the moment to try to break the continuity of what was just occurring because you were, in a pain response. And we see that with a lot of different things. Because it makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's been tricky for me because sometimes redirection is I can hustle myself into think I'm redirecting, but I'm really just trying to force it away, and then I score keep um, how successful I am at not paying attention to it. And then when I moved from doing that, because that becomes a struggle and the focus is still pain. So the pain wins and it's out of balance still. Um, and so then I moved to accepting pain. And with this pain, what else can I notice? And that helped me not do what I just previously explained. If I can accept that there is pain there, but there are also plenty of other things occurring at the same time. And then when I choose those other things, it mediates the pain.
Mhm. Why would we talked about this earlier, and the point just kind of came to me again, maybe because it's you who's speaking, Donna, but no, what really is like the point of all of that? If let's reverse the circumstances and there isn't a lot of pain and maybe things are okay right now, you know, you're feeling good. Not just you. This would be anybody, but it's you who reminded me just because we talked about this last week or might have even been this week because today's Sunday. But and then I'll talk about the redirection hustle because I have a mechanism to prevent that. If you have to redirect, you have to redirect, and you might as well do it correctly according to the practice. I do it correctly according to the practice if I have to redirect because I'm redirecting. That means something. Okay. But last week, or no, maybe it was Thursday, we went over a really important point, and it had a lot to do with creativity, the point of the human being, the point of all matter, all life, all cells. It's in a matter of creation. The human, however, and other species, birds. I think there's probably like lizards and definitely aquatic creatures and probably a lot that I don't recognize because I can't quite see it yet. I need to pay attention more to nature and then I'll have more examples of self-awareness because I think it probably exists much more than I think 2 degrees, right? But the human being has a capacity of self-awareness that I think is to a very high degree. And that's what we do in this practice, right? So increasing our capacity for self-awareness will allow us, hopefully, if we're doing this practice, we've already cleared some interference. We're not talking about that now. Like we're assuming that the interference, at least in the moment, is being elongated and hopefully maintained. Establish, elongate, maintain. I want to establish clearing interference. That's what we do at the beginning of our practice. It takes a long time. And it's not always easy. We're still doing it sometimes, right? But then we learn how to elongate our practice. And maybe we elongate our practice with objects of power, having reminders like that. Maybe having accountability buddies, maybe doing different kinds of physical reminders throughout our environment, like we talked about. Maybe segmenting, maybe things like that. Maybe preparing for areas where there's a little bit more interference and resistance strategically, that type of thing. That is how we elongate. Well, what we're talking about in warrior training is how we maintain. And I'm talking about generally maintaining our practice and maintaining awareness of self. And then when we clear the resistance, well, then we start to create with that self-awareness. I mean, we've always been creating, right? But not necessarily with the self-awareness. So what is this all about? We want to merge our intention with our attention to generate what I have copied from Don Juan, a term from Don Juan, personal power. Does that make sense? That's why it's warrior training. Because we're not necessarily focusing on establishing. That would be more of a redirection type of class. It would be more of a basic foundations type of class. We would probably talk about definition of attention and that stuff. And then when we really start talking about redirection more in the island of the practical, that now we're talking about elongating our presence and our self-awareness. But now we're talking about maintaining awareness on our breath all day and feeling peace. Well, now we're talking about maintaining attention because that's default. If you're paying attention to your breath all day, you're paying attention to yourself all day. And that is the definition of maintain. I mean, there's no getting, that's what it is. And you maybe will still have breaks, you maybe will still have gaps. And please remember, this is still 2 degrees, right? You're moving back and forth. Okay. So some of the things that I would do would really involve imagination when it came to things that were unpleasant. And I still needed to interact with my breath because I wanted to maintain my 4 directions. Because I have identified that everything in my life goes according to my practice in the 4 directions. My day, the quality of my day is directly proportional to how soon and how often I establish my practice. And specifically where I am with my practice, I am establishing the feeling of being content while still moving forward. That's the Andy Dufresne principle. So I take a lot of what, Thich Nhat Hanh says with being content, feeling happy, but then I still take like what Don Juan says and what some other authors say, and I still make sure that I'm moving forward and creating. So that's my longest vision, highest reach, deepest love. I'm still doing something right now, and that's still moving towards something, but I don't have to be rushed. I don't have to feel like psychological time is strangling me. And as you can imagine, as a student of Chinese medicine, I'm surrounded by that. And I really do my best not to indulge that, you know. I really do my best. And maybe sometimes this is an example, Jerry, of when I have to use my redirection. And then that's a great segue into making sure that we're not hustling ourselves. So, one of the things is that navigating a school atmosphere is I haven't been in school since 2000 and something, like in a school. I'm not talking about online classes. I'm talking about I got to look at people. And I'm only looking at myself in the mirror for 15 minutes a week, you know? So it's like there's certain things that are new to me, is what I'm saying. It's not familiar to me. So I don't have as many strategies around those things. It's logical to assume that if I don't have as many strategies, I have to create those strategies. And that's not always the smoothest process because it's a lot of being aware of what doesn't work. And then you're like, oh, shit, I could have done that better. All right, that's fine. Take it under advisement, add it to the frame, and then I'll move on. And then I'll be present. And then hopefully, when the situation occurs again, I can expand my knowledge unto wisdom. But there's a lot of situations that I can give you when I'm in the schoolroom environment where I have to redirect. And sometimes okay, so maybe one of the one that just came to my mind, I don't know. I found out that I get to know my score in comprehensive exams. I thought that it was just pass or fail. Pass or fail is like, I just, I don't know my score. Just go do your shit, right? Just pass or fail. This is my post. Don't focus on the material. Don't focus on the goal, or not the goal, but the whatever that post said. So that, oh, Ida, we're all hustling ourselves at times, but I have mechanisms to help with that. Please embrace the mechanisms if you want to do this practice, or it will be more difficult
I was just
unnecessarily.
noticing there, sorry, while you were talking about saying at the beginning of class that was putting, I was observing my breath all week, and I just realized while you were talking about imagination, the times when I use imagination are are probably twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, when I do a set meditation thing on the Shakti mat. And I use my
Really?
imagination when my eyes are closed,
Oh,
not necessarily during the day to
oh my
use an
gosh.
imagination. Yes,
Ida,
I know.
you
I'm a
signed up for,
disgrace.
we're going to do a one-on-one and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
Because I think
eyes
that,
closed.
oh, you don't have to close your eyes.
I
I'm
do.
not closing my eyes
Use
right now. I've been doing it this whole time. I've
no,
been breathing into my cervical vertebra with imagination.
I'm probably too hard on myself because I know when I'm
It just takes
walking,
practice.
I do have I do use imagination techniques
Mhm.
when I'm walking,
Yeah, it just
and
takes practice.
certain times when I'm in the studio, I know I'm using imagination techniques when I'm
Yeah.
painting. So I'm probably been a bit hard on myself, but noticeably, um, my imagination is really strong when I've got my eyes closed and I'm lying down. Of course, you have nothing else to distract you, so you can really use your mind, you know?
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised. A lot of people would lay down and their mind would just go straight to words. So don't cut yourself short there either. You
I
know,
think you're cutting yourself short, Ida. I'm sorry to
I think you
blurt
are
that
too a little
out
bit.
like
Yeah.
my obnoxious way, but I think you're cutting. I think you use imagination all day, and you're just not putting it in
Oh, I don't know
that
about that.
category. I do.
Well, let's look at that. Hold on. Okay. Okay. We got
Ida
to keep things
sees
in order.
color. She sees things. I just believe imagination is maybe not as deliberately, maybe, but I don't think that maybe it's not deliberate, but I think it's natural to you more than me. And I don't know.
Well, make it
I think
deliberate.
if we talked about it more, it would maybe just make it more deliberate or notice that you're doing it. But I think you do it.
Yes,
Mhm.
I think making it more deliberate, I think that's the thing because a lot of it is automatic and you don't recognize it as a practice. I only recognize the things as a practice, as formal things that I'm doing. That seems to be the way my mind recognizes a practice.
Well, imagine your
Like,
entire day is a formal practice.
yeah, that's
That's
good
your formal
advice.
practices today.
Yeah, okay,
You see what I mean?
thank you.
No, Ida, this is great stuff. Yeah. So I have so much to talk about here. Let me just finish a quick example, and then we'll talk about redirection hustle, and then we'll talk about make sure that we are clear on imagination, and then how to make it a little bit more deliberate if we are, you know, in alignment with our understanding of imagination. So just the example of redirection that will lead to telling you how I did that. How did I do the redirection? Where I am with my practice, how did I do it? Well, what was my cause? What was my cause for? Oh yeah, because I found out that I do see my grade. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, shoot, what if I just barely pass? What does that mean? You know, when I get to the biological section and I get a 71, I'll be like, you know what? I actually probably think that I failed and the teachers don't want you to fail. And maybe I was just so close. Do you see that stream of thought that would start to go? I don't know if I had that stream of thought until just now, but well, it's slightly different. No, no, no. No, not that at all. No, actually, no, Ida. No, 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 no. Hold on, let me backtrack. No. The reason for my questioning is because it's like, do I know this? Am I going to be able to use this information when I need it to help somebody? Should I be getting a 71%, like on biology and still be talking to somebody about their health, you know? So no, it has absolutely nothing to do with other people and what they think about me because they don't see my score. I don't care about that at all. Do I measure up enough to do what I want to meet the goal of helping people and meeting treatment outcomes? Because that's what it's all about. I don't want to just throw needles in somebody, charge a bunch of money and be okay with that without them yielding a tangible, beneficial result.
Right,
Tangible.
right. But there's a 2 degrees to that
There
also.
is, sure.
I used to do that with my nursing. Like I have to know this, I have to know this as the first one in
Yeah.
the lab, the last one out. And I made it stressful, more stressful than it needed to be. And you know what? You can find the information if you don't have it. You can find it easily. And then
Mhm,
you can be really good at finding information quickly. And then that relaxes you a little bit.
mhm,
I know where to look for this. I know how to search for it. I know how to zero in on it if it's not in my immediate recall.
mhm. So I remember the the moment that I was told that we know our score. I felt something and it didn't feel right. It felt like I was going back towards a pattern. So the thoughts didn't actually occur. So I didn't necessarily need to redirect thought patterns, though I don't usually have to do that, to be fair. I don't talk to myself like that anymore. And I haven't for so long, I don't really, the thought streams don't really get to gain momentum. But I still felt that I was moving towards, oh my God, like, that pattern of I'm going to see my score. Like, obviously, I want a 98 or 99. Can I get 100? Like, can I study enough to get 100% and then make sure that I know this material? And then when it comes to clinic time, I can justify my treatments. I know what I'm doing. And these people are going to leave the treatment room better than when they came in. So that's what it's all about. And I felt myself going towards a pattern. That's the bottom line. And I needed to redirect. I redirect that. If I feel myself going towards a pattern of, and I see it sometimes, and then sometimes I see it afterwards, and that's a part of the learning process too. You still see things sometimes a little bit afterwards. Sometimes you see them as they occur. Sometimes you feel it precognitively before it starts to generate much momentum. And it just depends on what the stimuli is as to how you're going to respond and to which degree. So, helping people in this capacity is very important to me and for a lot of different reasons. So there is some, I don't know if attachment is the right word, but there's some energy towards it, right? But the other thing is that I'm doing it simply because it's an act of impeccable intent. And I'll accumulate personal power, and the ripples in the pond of eternity will be something that I can feel good about. That's it. There's no real other motivation. I don't want to help people necessarily. Oh, you muted and unmuted.
What's the avoiding the self hustle?
What?
Catching it earlier? I mean, you
Oh, no, 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 no.
okay.
So the way that I avoid the self hustle is I still do the redirection the way that I know how to do it. So the first thing I do is I establish my 4 directions. And I do that really quickly. And it's usually with a breath. And sometimes, I close my eyes. It depends on the strength of what I need to redirect. And then I talk to myself. I use words. I remind myself with words, what am I doing with my practice? So if I redirect, typically I remind myself of what I'm cultivating. Because the moment that I feel the need to redirect, I establish my 4 directions. So that's not the issue for me. It's not, oh my gosh, I have to refine my 4 directions. I can do that instantly. The moment that I know that it's not there, I go back to my bubble of perception. I go back to my cervical vertebra, breathing smoothly into it so that I can relax my spine. And then I also breathe down into the ground in a certain way, just immediate. And then I'm breathing. I have my internal, my external, all of my directions of attention are valid and active again. Not that they weren't a moment ago. I just felt the pull towards something. In fact, I would say that they had to be intact to feel the pull. The less intact they are, you don't feel the pull. You might notice it as you say it. The less intact your practice is, you probably would notice it after the fact. because the practice isn't in place. How could you notice? Okay, so the thing that I make sure that I don't do is just skip the steps of redirection. I have a rule of 3. I talk to myself. I make sure that I reestablish all 4 directions of attention, which goes into my body, which goes into my breath. And I make sure to talk out my practice. That's how I prevent the self-hustle. I say what I'm doing. I'm going back to cultivation. I'm going back to cultivating content. Does that make sense? And then I do the imagination technique in a certain way. It is still redirection, but I don't bypass talking my practice out, intending it, declaring it. I still do that because I had to. If I'm redirecting, that's a sign that that was something. I don't have to put a bunch of labels on it, but it definitely was something that pulled on my energy. And so that redirection is just as valid as if I had lost all 4 directions and started cussing someone out. Oh, well, that happened. I got cussed out because I was on my bike. I had to redirect that because I wanted to just tell her where to go. And I did kind of tell him something. I didn't need to say that because for a moment he couldn't go anyway. And so I told him that he's not a bad person probably, but he's a terrible driver. And then I rode off. I didn't need to do that. Do you see what I mean? That's learning, learn, grow. The next time I'm not going to say anything. There's no need to interact. And at Chicago, it can be quite dangerous. Oh, and it infuriated him because I said it really calmly. Because he was there, like he was within shouting, like talking distance. And he was mad at me because I'm trying to ride my bicycle. And that time I was actually riding it appropriately. In Chicago, you don't stop at stop signs on a bicycle. It's just this weird thing. Like if you're driving in very fast traffic, it's dangerous to go the speed limit. It's that type of thing. Okay, does that make sense? The self-hustle of redirection is when we don't necessarily do the redirection that we did on day 1. We try to skip some steps with it, and we call that redirection. No, what about those core elements that we talked about earlier? Are those core elements in place? The answer is yes or no. So either I have declared them, they're either, they're from my toolbox, depending on the degree of redirection is like how much out of my toolbox I have to pull out and usually how fast that process happens. So I don't skip those steps though. When stuff happened with my mom, I had to have my mantras, I had to have my productive self-dialogue. I had to remind myself of a variety of different things, and I still had to make sure that my practice was there. But I didn't do it by skipping any of the elements. I can't skip those elements or it won't work. Or it won't work how I want it to. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense, and it just reminds me of why I am not at all upset when you want to start over again recordings and go back to beginner stuff because you're, refining the practice. You want to meet people where they are, and I really enjoy the beginner things because I reflect on what worked and what didn't work and examples of things, but the reality is what you're talking about right now is the most helpful thing is not the reality. That's a stupid term. Um, it is. It's all relative. Is that it's the beginner mind. It's just we have more momentum going, so it's not as clunky and it's not as we don't have to stay so long in each of those things. We just have to remember that that's still part of what we're doing every day, every time we redirect, um, and that's where the hustle exists. You're exactly such a fucking genius. I'm sorry, I know you're recording. That is the practice. The practice is the same as it is from day 1, except where we are meeting the practice is different. but the practice hasn't changed. The principles haven't changed. The steps haven't changed, and we can't skip them. It's really, I know you've said it a million times. I just had a light bulb moment about it, because then I just had a reflection of where my self hustle is
Mhm.
and why it's ineffective sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And the reason that this refinement occurs is only because I have to do it myself, right? So when I start to go a direction that I can feel is unbeneficial, I have to ask myself, where are my four directions? Why am I not paying attention to that? Why am I starting to go into this and into this and into this? That's not my practice. That's not what I want. That is a pattern. That is repetitive. That is a part of a greater habit that's been happening all my life. That is not making me feel inspired like I want to create, you know, I feel like I'm going away from content. I feel like I'm going away from peace. So I just know that that's not the direction I need to be going. And if that's the case, I have to go back. I have to make sure that I go back to my practice. And that includes every single basic element.
Right. The battlegrounds may change.
Mhm.
The maintaining and elongating may change. The amount of space you have may change, but the practice is the same.
And that's why ultimately there can be no masters, there can be no gurus, there can be nobody who is better than anybody else in this practice, because we're all just, this is where we are. These are the tools we have to work with. And it's a very individual type of affair, type of
At
thing
this moment.
at this moment. Yeah. And then the way that it's not individual is when we come together and we talk about it and we work together and, we figure this stuff out. But ultimately, we have a choice in the world. Like we can either locate self-awareness, and I don't mean that in a hipster way. You know how I mean that word. We can either find self-awareness and create from that space, or we can continue to create from a space of repetitive, habitual patterns that just don't really advance anything. It is a form of movement that's not really changing. It's moving and it's changing on a fundamental level, but it's not changing enough. It's not moving enough. Take the water that gets stagnant and makes everything sick. Well, I mean, on a molecular level, the atoms and stuff are still moving. So there is still movement, it's not, but on a human level, right? To a human degree of the difference between energy and matter and the flux between the two. So we're somewhere closer to matter a lot of the time, at least physically, right? Our body. So, there is a point where there's not enough movement occurring. And that's what a pattern is. And that's what a habit creates. That's what an attachment comes from, is that imbalance. And that's why balance is the principle. It is the principle. And you can see that's why this practice works so well, is because I refuse to violate those principles. In fact, there was one point where I did say that we want to get to a point where we never think, we never have words in our mind. I did say that at one point, like very early on. And then I never said it again because I heard myself say it. And then I, it would be the guru, that guru aspect is like, Ernest, wait, that can't be true. That sounds like an opposite extreme of thinking all the time. You can't go from thinking all the time to not thinking at all and expect that to also be healthy. You have that capacity as a human being, so it must be valuable. And then I never said that again. So it's learn, grow, evolve. That will be for me as 110 as it is right now. Maybe 109. I don't know. I have to downgrade it. It's how my kidney deficiency. We'll see. 109 and a half. Yeah, so imagination now, one of the things about imagination is it becomes easier to take with you, Ida, when you link it with the other aspects of your practice, when you link the imagination with your breath, when you link the imagination with the body and the body attention and the external attention and how those two things are moving, very often I am imagining, and it is a feeling, but I still imagine the movement of energy up the back of my neck. And then I often feel it down into my feet and into the ground. And I will often imagine roots, like literal roots where I'm standing. Another way to use your imagination is to kind of perceive without sense. So there are things behind Donna, and she knows that they are there. She could hold them in her mind's eye. That's a form of imagination.
Yeah,
So,
I've been thinking about the photo of the empty building since you said it. And I've been, the whole time we've been talking, and I've been imagining the movement that's occurring in that empty building, the grass that's growing up between the cracks, the bugs that have taken space inside,
mhm.
and that's imagination to me. I mean, that might be really happening, but I'm imagining it.
Yeah, that's an important point too. The imagination that I recommend taking with you throughout the day. Nothing wrong with imagination that is removed, that isn't necessarily superimposed. There's nothing, because I do that every morning, and I do that sometimes when I think I need a reminder. Like, what is it? Why am I doing this? Oh, yeah. Let me just imagine, where this came from in the first place, you know, which is maybe imagining me in a clinic, with herbs around, and, Shayna is helping, going back and forth between rooms. I like imagining that sometimes just to say, okay, that's okay, I'm on track. What I'm doing right now is still leading towards that. That's cool. But I don't do that as a technique that I take with me throughout the day. I can't, because that degree of cognition will take me away from the world around me. So in order to imagine in that capacity, it is very difficult to maintain the awareness necessary to walk in Chicago and feel safe. So the imagination that I'm talking about normally, when I talk about imagination throughout the day, is going to be a superimposed imagination. It is somehow superimposed over the moment itself. So it's a part of, I'm still present. I'm still very present, because technically, the more that you go into an imaginary scenario, you are actually removing yourself from the moment. And that can be okay in moderation, just like anything else,
Oh, and
right?
it has occurred because
Yeah.
while I was imagining it, then the balance, I was spending too much attention in the
Mhm.
balance equation. I think of it like an equalizer of music. You know how you have to keep moving the pegs to let the bass up a little bit and the voice down a little bit, and that's what I'm doing all day. But during this class, while I was imagining, then I noticed that I'm leaning in because I want to listen, or I really like that point, and my posture fell apart, and I could feel the pull of and then back to the basics. Where's my posture? Where's my internal? Where's my external? How's my breath?
Mhm.
Am I still aware of all of that? Just I think of it as an equalizer that with all of those adjustments, micro adjustments
Mhm.
to the balance because it changes. It's a moving, uh, undulating thing.
So we all remember the smooth breath. So if you do smooth breath plus body scan, watch this. So I do the hand movement, so you can kind of see the movement of scan as I'm going down my body, right? It's a common tech thing that,
I
teachers
do it,
do.
and people think I'm just trying to calm down because I'm going to lose my
Oh,
temper. They don't
oh,
realize
no,
that I'm
no, no.
not angry at all.
No, yeah, it's a body scan. All right, so you guys all know what that is. So we're going to move on to an important topic regarding the different breathing techniques that have been offered so far, the interstitial breathing, right? Because we want to take it with us in the interstitial spaces of our day. All your other breathing techniques are fine too, if you need them, but that might not necessarily be what we're talking about here with interstitial breathing. because interstitial is very smooth, very, I'm aware of you, and you have changed a little bit since I became aware of you, but I'm gonna kind of let you do your thing. I'm just gonna be aware and just, we're gonna move together a little bit now, as opposed to moving so separately. Okay, so the body scan. So I'm gonna show you a technique to increase your energy, and I'm gonna do it quietly. Okay, are you watching? You gotta watch the screen. Okay, so I'm gonna do it. Okay, that increased energy. Now I'm gonna do a technique to decrease energy. Are you ready? Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to do one to increase focus and concentration so I can do better like at school and stuff. Are you ready? Okay. You were watching, right? Because I'm not talking. So if you're listening to the audio, this isn't making sense. Okay. Now I'm going to do a technique. This is a very special technique to help you increase personal power. A very secret, hidden, ancient technique. Okay, I'm going to show you. You got to watch. Okay, are you ready? You already probably know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to just play it out. All right. Did you see it? I am very confused on it. I saw both yes and no.
Uh, I see it with my third eye because I know where you're
Aha.
going, but I didn't see it on the screen. No,
What do you think was different then? Or did I do anything different at all?
you did. The intention and
Ah,
where you're focusing the breath and how you're moving it, where you see it moving in your body, where you're sending it, where you're pulling it from. That's what you're doing, and it's all with your mind because
okay.
the breath looks exactly the same.
Absolutely. Well, you just got straight to that shit. All right. Yeah. And then the words in chat, absolutely correct. Intention. I just gave you a demonstration of intention, and you can do it yourself. So when you do that, do the exact same movement with the exact same body scan, but change your intention and change your four directions and what you're doing with your four directions. So if I say that I want to increase energy, what do you think I'm doing? Just give me some ideas. What do you think? What would you do? Like, what are some things that I'm doing? Which direction does energy go if we want to increase, if we want things to, without telling you the answer,
Up and out.
up and out? That's a good start. So if I'm going to imagine myself gaining energy, am I going to imagine like really dark images over my moment? Or am I going to imagine maybe more brighter images with my moment? Probably more brighter, right? Probably. I mean, there's no absolute to this. Okay. So do I want the energy to move quicker or do I want it to move slower? Well, I guess it could be a little bit of either, right? Well, no, if I want energy to go like carry a 5 gallon bottle of water up the stairs, no, I want energy to move a little quicker.
Yeah, but if you were going to run a long race, then it would be different.
Yeah, still quicker than when I'm walking, but not as quick as if I'm sprinting. Degrees. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so this sometimes, and I think it might be because of capitalism, money. We want people want money. That sometimes we end up with a lot, and sometimes, dynamic movement. Well, you do need to move in a dynamic way. That's not what we're talking about here. But sometimes I think that for one reason or another, we're offered a wide variety of this, that, and the other thing. And I'm not saying that that's bad stuff. I'm just saying that there's so much of it. Like there's so many things. It's like trying to find the right cereal at a typical grocery store? And there is no real good answer to that. But when you look at the cereal aisle, it is literally from one end of the building all the way down. And it's like, do we need all of the cereal, considering that there's like 6 different types of one type of, like one basic kind of cereal, like Raisin Bran in America? Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm okay with Raisin Bran being a choice, but do I really need 6 different varieties of Raisin Bran then to choose from? So that's kind of what is happening, it seems like, with the idea of technique sometimes in the world, is that we're being offered all of these different techniques from all of these different people, when really the only thing that you ever needed to do is change your intention with what you're doing, and you can change the result because it's the mind. E leads chi. And we're learning to interact with the subtle. So it would make sense that the more that we can clear interference, the more that our 4 directions can help us to elongate and maintain the reduction of interference. And of course, we don't maintain a reduction. That doesn't make sense. Instead, we increase our connection and maintain our connection to the world in a very specific and deliberate way. So there's a lot of intention already. And if there's a lot of intention, just a pop quiz, what else are we generating? What else is there? Personal power, intention, and will. The more you do this practice, the more you fundamentally gain personal power. There's nothing you can do about it. As long as you do the practice, it's going to occur because it's intention and will. And the gap between those two, as we go along in our practice, gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The smaller and smaller gap between intention and will to accumulate personal power. We've been talking about that for years. Okay, so the idea is that I've learned so many different like Qigong techniques, and I've learned so many different this, that, and the other thing, but I just do the ones, A, that make me feel the best, B, that give me the most diversity in terms of like range of motion and things like that. But I can do those same movements and yield completely different results based on my intention alone. And that's the most important thing. And it's interesting because I think that's actually one of the most important things in the medicine that I'm learning to practice. I actually think it's one of the most important things in the human experience. And really look at this. What if somebody tells you something that isn't true, but they didn't know? It's kind of hard to get mad at them, right? Like if Donna tells me something that she thinks is true and it's not, and later she finds out and she's like, Ernest, I'm sorry, I told you something that wasn't true. Am I going to get mad at her? Like, you fucking liar. I can't believe it. Well, I wouldn't, of course not, because of her intention. Her intention wasn't to deceive me. She wasn't trying to hurt my feelings or anything like that. She didn't know. Intention is everything. Does that make sense? What do we want to judge people on when they go to their intention? What was their intent? What is the thing that people conceal and manipulate the most? Their intent. So we interact with intention all the time, whether we know it or not. And I think a good way to describe what warrior training prepares us for is to begin using our intent differently. And I think that's a good example, kind of showing you what that means in a more tangible way. When you do the exact same body scan exercise, but completely change, you can, we could do this together, but we do have to take our dogs because the time changed for us, not for them. So we do got to get them outside. But in one example, do what you would do to raise energy. You know, things are moving, things are bright, things are great. And then do something maybe that you would do to lower energy, but do the exact same physical movement. Say something different to yourself. Energy is rising, moving through my body, up and out into the ether. That's different than I'm taking energy in through the third eye, into the body, down into the earth. I can relax. mindfulness. I did the exact same motion, but the intent is different. Now, you won't always need the words, but words are great to declare intent. And it's also a great way to not hustle yourself. Does that make sense? So a lot of topics covered, I think. We didn't do a bunch of movement because I forgot that it's 5:30 in the morning and Shana just didn't really want to, and I don't really want to. I told you I do 15 minutes a day or a week in the mirror. But so what we'll do is we'll plan and we'll actually have an idea of like how we're going to set up to do something more movement based, because that is a part of warrior training. So one thing that I want to do with warrior training are things like meditation. Not yet. I don't want to do that quite yet, but movement, fox walking, any of our more meditative type of things. Warrior training is the perfect time to start doing that. Because if I say, where is your mind in Tai Chi? What would you say? According to Ernest, like, and if you're working with me, what would I say?
Down 10.
Maybe. Which direction is that?
Down.
Internal.
Internal. Yes.
What else, Ida?
Heart.
No, that's also internal.
Golden line. Well, then outside into your bubble of perception.
Oh, good one. Proprioception, like being aware of your environment. Good for martial arts. So that's a Tai Chi thing. All right, cool. So now you have two directions. What else?
Imagination, of course.
You could. Some teachers are like, imagination. No, but I recommend that. I think that's a great one to add to your Tai Chi. What's the fourth one?
It really is the first one, is your breath.
It's your breath. Yeah. Long would say no. Long would not tell you to start focusing on your breath in Tai Chi. David Dorian Ross would. Two different strokes for different folks. Long says don't focus on your breath. Just do the movements and eventually your breath will catch up. And that's actually, notice that when you do your Tai Chi in your mind, your actual breath will start to link with the movements that you're imagining.
Yes, I've noticed that it goes into its own pattern.
Yeah.
And it's always, mine's always the same when I do the 18 gates and some of those Tai Chi practices that we learned in the beginning. My breath does its own thing.
Right.
Almost, you know.
Add imagination to it. Feel it in other areas of your body, like play with the breath, fill the breath into the room. If you have areas of tension, imagine those. We were talking about the two types of breath between tonifying and sedating. Get that pain, just let that pain go. Send that out into the ether. You don't need it. It's not yours, right? Just feel the energy moving through that area and out, that type of thing. That's intention. So what were we saying? Okay, so what were we saying? I think I was leading somewhere because we got to get out of here.
You were talking about movement and Tai Chi and how you're going to get into more practices.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Bottom line, anything that I show you, the 4 directions needs to be a part of it. So it makes sense to flesh all that out first, which of course you guys have, but we've gone over the methodology. That is a part of everything else I do. So if we're talking about Tai Chi, where's your 4 directions? Where's your mind? And did you put it there? When we're talking about Qigong, where's your mind? Did you put it there? Where's your 4 directions? When we talk about soaking your feet or applying pressure to acupuncture points, where is your mind and did you put it there? Where's your 4 directions? That's it. That's always the base of everything else. So I don't want to show somebody Tai Chi. I don't want to show somebody Qigong. I don't want to do these things until first we understand where our mind should be. Does that make sense? And you guys already know that. So now we can start to move on to some of the movement things. And I'm not going to show you a bunch of shit. I'm going to show you the few things that I do. And when I do them in the morning, it is completely different than if I were to do it in the afternoon and at night. Why? Because my intention is different. Why? Because my environment is different. Why? Because the time of day is different. Why? Because the moment is constantly changing, so the intention is constantly changing as well. Remove the element of intention, and why are you self-aware? What does it even matter? Who cares? If you don't care about intention being deliberate, then this practice just doesn't make sense. Which I know, of course, you do, but that was a general statement, you know. Any questions before we head out of here? Because my dog is like, I'm pretty sure it's 7:41. Because he was making his noises at 3:30 this morning. And I'm like, God, he's up early, but then I realized the time changed. He's right on time. His dog clock is spot on. I don't know.
Oh yeah, he's like, geez, I've got to wait another hour.
That's how he sounds.
Yeah,
That's my impression for the day.
The
All right,
bladder alarm.
exactly. Okay, so at some point we'll do some basic qigong movements, and these I'll give you the ones that I do. I don't want to just I don't know. That's the best I can do. I'll show you the ones that I do. I'll show you the intention and how you can change the intention within the same movement. And those can be things that you add. And then, of course, this is because at this point we're learning to more than just establish. We want to elongate and maintain awareness on the breath throughout the day. And then we're going to start adding more of the formal practices. Because now, after our breath is more elongated, then our fourth direction gets more elongated. And then some of the formal practices, really, we shouldn't have a whole lot of resistance. And when we do, we know what to do with that, right? Because we can't ignore sleep, nutrition, exercise, movement, meditation. There are aspects to help make a person feel whole and complete and connected. And it's going to be different for every single one of us. So it has to be a unique individual thing because we're all different. Okay, well, sweet dreams, Jerry, and I will see everybody on Thursday for group study. I think Shayna and we know what we want to do next. I think that we really need to talk more about the traps of thinking. So I think just going through all of them, and I'm going to stick to what we said, Jerry, originally. We'll keep the repetitive, habitual, and not making me feel well as the first and most important, and the only three we really need to talk about. But we will talk about the rest because here we are in the world that we live in, and I think they could be very timely and beneficial.
they're very
So
helpful. They're very
yeah,
helpful.
and they're so logical. It just makes so much sense, and it's just a good reminder for myself and for everybody else when we make those. We still need to do the basic theory. Basic theory will include like textbook citations, the definition of attention, sensory perception. This stuff isn't a big deal for you guys, you know? So Shayna and I will probably just make those videos on our own and release those because we don't need to go into a 2-hour chat about what is attention. Like you guys, if you don't know what attention is by now, like no, that's just a stupid statement. I'm not even going to go there. So yeah. All right. Any questions before we head out? Still lots to discuss. And then stuff gets medical once I graduate, because I really believe the way that we interact with our mind has an absolute direct impact on our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So yeah, those will be my published papers, my thesis and all that kind of stuff, immediate and long term. Yeah. Yep. All right, well, I gotta study because I got a test. So I will see everybody on Thursday. And then just send me a message if you have a question or a comment or anything that you think would be a good thing to talk about. Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Hey, bye-bye.
Yep. You're welcome. See you later.